And so welcome and good evening. Thank you everyone for coming out tonight. My name is Luke Zoller, and it's my privilege and pleasure as Vice President of College Republicans to welcome you here tonight.
Hi, I'm Angela Bell. I'm President of College Republicans, and we're so excited to have our speaker tonight.
First, I want to quickly acknowledge a few special guests here in attendance, including Senator Coulterman, the Nebraska State Senator for District 24. Also, we have representatives from both Senator Sass's team and Congressman Fordbear's team. Thank you all for being here. I also want to thank the Concordia students, Seward community members, and College Republican members for coming out tonight. And a special thank you to Young America's Foundation for sponsoring this event and making Curt Schilling's visit here possible.
As you may know, tonight's event is hosted by Concordia University College Republicans Club. The CR group was reignited in January of 2018 with the purpose of giving students opportunities to be actively involved in the political process and get involved in their community. In just under 2 years, we have gained over 100 student members and led the charge on several important projects. On September 11th, you may have seen our display of 2,977 flags on Highway 34 to memorialize the men and women who lost their lives as a result of the 9/11 attacks. If you've ever enjoyed a delicious dinner at the Seward VFW in the past 2 years, one of our members probably brought you your meal. Last year alone, our members knocked hundreds of doors in Seward, York, Omaha, and even North Dakota for local candidates. We've attended trainings, invited speakers, and even sent students to CPAC in Washington, D.C. One of our goals as College Republicans is to encourage political dialogue here on campus. Not everyone agrees on every issue, even here at Concordia. Many of you may even disagree politically with tonight's speaker, and that's fine. That's what America is all about, being able to express our beliefs and speak freely in order to advance change and progress. So with that, I'd like to invite up our campus pastor, Reverend Matthias, to lead us in prayer, followed by Kirsten Wagner, who will lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
You didn't know it was me, did you? So if you would have been a Yankee, I would have loved you. And then 2001 and 2004 happened, and I couldn't even hardly go to work. But then I meet you 15 years later, and I realized that we cheered for the King of Kings together, and I'm okay. I'm okay. So am I. So, thank you for being here. Let's pray. Heavenly Father, we thank and praise you for the gift of faith, the gift of hope, and the gift of life that's won by Jesus Christ, the King of Kings. For one who is given the ability to speak of you, of faith, of life, and of hope, we pray that you continue to guide Curt in all the things that he does, in all of his ways. Be with his family. Continue to guide and shelter them by your grace. And I pray through all things you've given such a great grace to spread the message of the gospel. I pray this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. All right, if you guys would rise and join me in saying the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you both. At this time, I'd like to introduce College Republicans Treasurer Jacob Jennings. He's a member of the Concordia men's basketball team and a big fan of tonight's guest. Jacob.
Luke, thank you for the introduction. Like you said, I'm a basketball guy. I love basketball, the pace of play, the action, athleticism is evident on every single play. Some of you may know where I'm going with this, but a lot of people argue the opposite is true in baseball. It's different, it's unique, and I love it for that. I love baseball. The history, the records, October playoff baseball. I don't think anything matches even the standard value of October playoff baseball. The first World Series I remember watching was 2004, actually. Some of you had a pretty good year that year. I was 6 years old at my grandparents' house watching that game. We had a little about 25-inch television screen in the kitchen to watch it on. I didn't really have a horse race that year, but then a few years ago I got to experience something really cool. 2014 and 2015, the Royals and the big KC guy. So that was really fun to watch. I've never experienced anything like that. The way the city rallied around the entire team. And then just last night, we got to experience the magic of October baseball in a really thrilling, come from behind victory, winner-take-all game. I love baseball. I know there are dozens of you here, more than that have a similar passion for it. And if you're a baseball fan at all, you're probably familiar with tonight's speaker. And that's why I'm so excited to have the honor and pleasure of introducing him to you tonight. He's a renowned athlete, a patriot. I've had the opportunity to sit with him just a little bit tonight. And I'll tell you, I'm very eager to hear what he has to say. We're going to learn a lot, and I think it's going to be a lot of fun. Curt Schilling is a three-time World Series champion and a proud American who has never been hesitant to voice his views or talk about his Christian faith. During his 20-year MLB career, he garnered a litany of awards and records. He was awarded the 2001 Roberto Clemente Award and Branch Rickey Award, among several other humanitarian awards. He earned a number of Pitcher of the Year awards, was a six-time All-Star, and has astounding playoff numbers, winning both an NLCS MVP and a World Series MVP. He finished his career with a 3.46 ERA, 216 wins, 3,261 innings pitched, 3,116 strikeouts, 83 complete games, and 20 shutouts. Despite his monumental successes as an MLB pitcher, and to the dismay of many baseball fans, Curt has yet to be inducted into the Hall of Fame. Some might argue due to his conservative views. After his retirement, Curt went on to be a sportscaster for ESPN. However, the network later fired him for his commentary on the North Carolina bathroom bill. In the last few years, he has continued to build his career as a conservative commentator via a daily online show for Breitbart, as well as his own personal podcasts. Curt has also had the honor of being part of 2 USO tours, visiting Iraq, Kuwait, Syria, Afghanistan, and many other locations where our troops are deployed. And recently, he has even considered a potential run for office in Arizona. I think we all wish we were in Arizona right now, considering the weather. And then last, certainly not least, he has been married 27 years to his wife, Shonda, and together they have 4 children, as well as 5 dogs, 7 alpacas, 3 llamas, 4 pigs, 7 goats, 2 geese, and a lot of chickens. So with that being said, let's give a warm welcome for Curt Schilling.
Couple things. 29 years. I always say that because my wife is probably going to be watching. And, that's not a good one to mess up on. Thank you for all of that. Based on the population sign I saw driving into town, it appears that the entire town is actually here tonight, which is very cool. 10 years ago, 11 years ago, I retired, and I went to work for ESPN. Didn't end well, but to this day, I tell people I sleep okay at night because I know who I am and all the things that I am, and that's a deeply flawed, can't shut me up kind of guy. But when I joined YAF, it was probably the first time I've been incredibly excited about something since I retired. And that's not to say, I mean, I've lived a dream life, but this is something I have wanted to do for a long time. I have 4 kids, 3 in college, 1 who hopefully will go to college. And I'm looking at a generation of young men and women being handed a world that is going to be far more challenging to navigate than anything we ever had. And in that way, I want to talk to them and engage with them. Liberals, conservatives, I don't care. To just try and get a message across. And I'm not really sure what that message, I think the message is different things for different people. But I wanted to start out tonight. I was asked by this group of amazing young men and women to come here and speak about faith and its relation to my life and my career. Something I'm excited to talk about. But I wanted to, by the way, saying you were 6 when I was in the World Series is not an exciting thing to hear. Matthew 10:22. You will be hated by everyone on account of my name, but the one who perseveres to the end will be saved. Make sure that stays with you when you leave here tonight, because we're watching it happen in real time. We're watching Christians worldwide, and here's the problem. First off, the world looks at Christians as people who put themselves on the pedestal, and we as Christians do the exact opposite. We recognize how deeply flawed we are, and we need God's grace to maintain, to live. But I thought that was kind of a powerful way to start. And before we get into the faith-based part of a lot of this conversation, Webster's dictionary defines persecution as the act or practice of persecuting, especially those who differ in origin, religion, or social outlook. And if you've watched the news in the last 2 years, you know there's one group of people who are doing everything they can do to annoy, harass, and suppress voices different than theirs. And that's the world that we're heading in, and it's unfortunate that we are. But I wanted I talked about this tonight at dinner. I look at what's going on here tonight, me being here, and trying to figure out the challenges that you're enduring. And to me, it comes down to a very simple thing. We are in a battle for information like at no time ever in our lives. How do I know that? I'm going to read the definition of fascism from Merriam-Webster. A political ideology and mass movement that dominated many parts of Central, Southern, and Eastern Europe between 1919 and 1945, also had its adherents in Western Europe. When you Google the definition of fascism, it is defined as a form of far-right, authoritarian ultranationalism characterized by dictatorial power, forcible suppression of opposition, and strong regimentation of society and the economy, which came to prominence in the early 20th century. Notice the one word in there that doesn't exist in Webster's? Far-right, right. Webster's defines socialism, meaning of various economic and political theories advocating collective or governmental ownership and administration of the means of production and distribution of goods. A society or a system of society or group living in which there is no private property. A system or condition of society in which means of production are owned and controlled by the state. That's Webster's definition. Google defines it as a political and economic theory of social organization which advocates that the means of production, distribution, and exchange should be owned or regulated by the community as a whole. The battle for information. It has gone so far beyond anything that we should have to endure, or you should have to endure. But you know what? Remember Matthew 10:22. Because you're living it now and you're going to live for the rest of your lives. I always tell people when I'm talking to someone on the left or an atheist or someone who doesn't have a religion or doesn't believe in God, when they ask me about this troubled world and all things we're going through, I smile and kind of, I don't chuckle, but I smirk a little bit and I tell them, I already know how the ninth inning plays out. I've read the book. I know what the score is going to be at the end of the game and I know how it plays out. And that doesn't elicit a friendly response, but it's comforting for me, and it should be comforting for you. You can turn the news on, any news channel now, and see stories that would have been producible 10 years ago, would have been put on TV 10 years ago from every possible community that's being offended by every possible thing being done, said today. What you can't find are the stories that are everyday stories that change lives. How many of you know a woman named Tina Hines? Raise your hand if you know that name. Tina Hines was a woman who was shot back to life 5 times in Phoenix, Arizona. Declared dead for 17 minutes and came back to life. And her daughter, Maggie Johnson, was the first to see her come out. And she asked for a notepad. And she wrote on the notepad, "It is real." And when she looked at the note and looked at her mom and said, "You mean heaven?" She said, "Yeah." And she goes on to tell the story of what that 17 minutes was. She was in heaven. She visited with the Lord. That's a story. Everybody should be able to raise their hands when you hear the name Tina Hines. And it's a story that went away as fast as it was given. Another one. And this is all. Have any of you ever seen the movie Miracles from Heaven? Anna Bean, who was the young lady, had a rare incurable disorder that leaves her unable to digest food. Despite the diagnosis, her devoted mother relentless search for ways to save her beloved daughter. Everything changes in an instant when she tells an amazing story of a visit to heaven after surviving a headlong tumble into a tree. Her family and doctors become even more baffled when the young girl begins to show signs of recovering from her fatal condition. The movie launched to literally no reviews. Was in and out of theaters in a heartbeat for all the reasons those movies are. Our faith, our devotion to our faith is an incredibly uncomfortable thing for people who don't believe to acknowledge, because it's horribly inconvenient to live the lives that people want to live if they have to factor in the Lord's judgment. It's hard enough to live with our judgment. I mean, he makes it very clear there's only one person that's going to judge, only one judge ever, but we still do it anyway. That's part of what we do as Christians when we sin. I sin every day. I don't try to. My wife would say I sin a lot more than I think I do. It's part of life. It doesn't have to be part, but it is. We're imperfect, and that's okay. And one of the reasons I appreciate that I hear often, very outspoken, tells it like it is. And my wife would say, no, he just talks. I tell it like I see it. Me being outspoken doesn't make me right. It makes me me. And I know who I am. And I'm okay with that. And that's where you need to be. And if you're not there, you need to get there. Because life is hard enough. You're up against odds that not many can sustain or withhold or fight against. But I want to read this quick story for you before I tell you my story. This is from a young woman who called into a Christian radio station. She said, one night I was driving home in rush hour, traffic on the freeway, and was listening to a Christian radio station. I can't tell you exactly who was speaking, but someone was talking about the crucifixion, and I didn't know what happened. I started crying and saying something like, oh, Jesus, please forgive me for sinning against you. I'm so sorry. After all that you did for me, look what I've done to you. I know who you are now. And the feeling in that car was overwhelming. I didn't know what was going on then, but I know now. The Holy Spirit swooped down on me, called me to Jesus, and I came. Isn't that something? The most incredible experience of my life that happened in a rush hour traffic jam on a cold night in November. I left the house that morning and came back at night a different woman, and I had no clue what was going on. To sum up my favorite song, or to quote my favorite song, which seems so very appropriate, and which one sentence certainly sums up what happened to me since I came to Christ. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. Once I was lost, but now I'm found. Was blind, but now I see. Those stories happen in the thousands. Those stories don't get reported in the hundreds. for all the reasons I said before. My story starts out kind of the same. And I grew up in a great family. I had an amazing father, amazing mother, very lower middle class. My father was Army. I wanted to serve. That's all I ever wanted to do. And I believed in God. I always believed in God. But I was part of some church groups, and it was kind of the touch and go thing for me. 1997, I was midway through the season. I didn't just have our second child. We just had our second child. And I was driving home from the park in my Mercedes something, which was a $100,000 car. And I was being paid a lot of money. And I just pitched against the Yankees and punched out 16 and beat them. And I had been reading about the Bible, about Scripture, and it was a lot of commentary on Revelations and the end times and all the other stuff. And I as much as I talk, I do have a lot of internal conversations as well. And I said to myself, after I had my second child, we could talk about the rapture and how Christians would disappear. God would take his children before he passed judgment. And I'm a father now, and I'm thinking to myself, I would really like for my kids to be on that first train out of here. And how does that happen? And then I started having another conversation, and I finally got to the question that it might sound corny, but why am I here? What's the purpose? I'm going to strike out 300 guys this year. I'm going to win 17 games, and the season's going to be over, and then what? And the season's going to be over, and then what? And that's going to repeat itself until someday when it all ends. And at that point, what will it all have been for? And I don't believe for a second that it's just, we're just here. We're not. There's no possible mathematical chance. So I started having that conversation with myself, and in the car, I gave my life to Christ. And I was like, after I said the Lord's Prayer, I kind of like opened an eye, like, okay, where does the light hit, and when does the whole conversion start? Nothing happened. But my life slowly started to change. And I became aware of things I'd never been aware of. I started reading the Bible. I also read the Quran. I read the Book of Mormon and all the other things. Because while I only went to 1 year at Yavapai Junior College, I wanted to be able to stand up and debate anybody, anywhere, with any education about the Lord, the Bible, and my faith. And I've done that with every subject I've ever gotten involved in. It's always fun to listen. Honest to God, some of the dumbest people I've met since I retired are Harvard graduates. They are. And some of the smartest people are trade school people who have spent their entire lives working to support their families. It's amazing to me when I run into a college group like this, because, and I said this at dinner tonight, I don't want to undersell this, and I do not want you to undervalue this. There has never, in our lifetimes, been a more important time for a generation to be engaged than now. We got 8 years of an administration due to apathy. When you say it like this, we have buried men and women of our armed forces all over the globe in defense of people they've never met, never would meet, for their freedoms and for ours. One of the most sacred things they fought for that we have is the right to vote and choose who leads us. And, we see numbers in the 60s, 60% voter participation. And I'm thinking, I get it. I didn't vote when I was 18. I was much more concerned about other things. And I get it, but now it's not an option anymore. It really honestly isn't. And when I see groups like this, I am consumed by a desire to sit up and talk and just converse and debate. I'm a little disappointed no one's protesting my presence. I was kind of hoping that I could engage some of these people. But that'll happen. I'm going to UPenn next week, so I'm sure it'll happen. But being engaged in understanding, I firmly believe we've all been put on earth to make a difference in other people's lives. Of that, I have no doubt. What you choose to do and how you choose to do it is on you. Last night, today actually, I prayed again. I just want to make sure that I do right by him. I'm not always going to win, but I'm never going to fail. And here's why I say that. And to you athletes in the room, you understand it. Maybe you can't acknowledge it, you don't acknowledge it yet, but the adults in this room totally understand where I'm coming from. You're going to lose every day in life. If you're married as a man, you're going to lose all the time. You're going to lose every day in life. Little things. Conversations, debates, investments, job, whatever, you're going to lose. The only possible way you can fail something is to quit. I have never in my life quit anything. I've been beaten, been pummeled on ESPN no less. Never by the Yankees when it mattered. But losing is part of losing and what am I looking for? Losing and emotional downs and swings is every bit as much a part of your everyday life as it is for the country. Since 1776, when the first citizen soldiers took up arms against the tyrannical government, we have been fighting a fight that hasn't changed. That's how I know I'm on the right side. I'm fighting for the things that they were fighting for 200 some years ago. And we are now at a place in time when our faith is being tested. I don't know about you, but my faith is being tested. Oftentimes, they say the Lord will never, ever put anything on your plate you can't handle. And there are oftentimes when I'm like, really? You think I'm that strong? Like, I don't see it. I don't see it. But I'm going to tell a couple stories that explain to you why I know it's true now. First, I'll start off with a funny baseball story. So in 1991, I'm playing for the Houston Astros, and we're in Cincinnati. And this was the 1990 Reds, where the nasty boys, the bullpen was insane. And they were World Series champs. Mark Portugal's pitching for us, and we're in Houston, we're in Cincinnati. And you remember the old cookie cutter stadiums, the round, turf, nasty, horrible places. In Cincinnati, Eric Davis hits the first pitch home run off Mark Portugal. And the cannon goes off in center field. And scared the hell out of me. Because it's reverberates in those stadiums. There's nobody in the ballpark. Scared the hell out of me. Paul O'Neill comes up. I think it was Paul O'Neill behind him. First pitch home run. Cannon goes off again. You kind of jump. 30 seconds later, Chris Seward comes up, first pitch home run, back to back. Our pitching coach jogs out to the mound, and I can see Porch facing the dugout, and he starts dropping F-bombs like there's nothing. No tomorrow. So apparently Bob Clark, our pitching coach, had run out, and Porch had looked at him and said, "What are you doing out here?" He said, "I got nothing for you, but I need to give that guy in center field time to reload the cannon before this hitter." And that was the reason. So, I had experiences in my life, on and off. I look back on that, I realized there was some intervention that was bigger than me. But probably the seminal moment in my relationship with Christ and understanding and experiencing true faith was 2004. Spring training that year, I was watching Pedro throw a bullpen, and Pedro did a little something extra with his foot. He hooked the rubber and was to give him leverage, and so I was asking him about it, and I started trying it, and it gave me a little bit more velocity. Well, about 10 days later, I started having, my right foot started aching a little bit. And I went to the doctors, and they told me I had a bone bruise, and if I kept doing the thing I was doing, I could get necrosis, which is basically the bone dies. And it's excruciatingly painful. So I was like, okay, well, that's years down the road. And about 10 days later, it became what they had diagnosed. And I had necrosis in my ankle of a piece of bone. Incredibly painful. So I was taking injections the entire year during the games. Our team doctor had to travel with us because he was the only one that could inject me. And I gotta tell you, the injection inside the ankle bone was far more painful than the injury was initially. But I went through the whole year, and I was getting injected and everything. And then we made it postseason. And I pitched game one against the Angels. And literally on the final play of me being in the game, Gary Anderson hit a slow roller, and I went to the first baseline, pick it up and throw it. And when I stepped over the line, the tendon tore off the bone in my right ankle. And so, you know the knobby bone on your ankle that sticks out? Well, there's a tendon that goes over there, there's a ligament that goes over there, and the tendons run under it. And when the ligament goes away, the tendons pop over that knobby bone. You can literally hear it. It's like a rubber band. So that started happening. We went to the doctors before, we were flying home that night, and the doctor said, you tore the peroneal tendon in your ankle. I was like, okay, so how do we fix it? He said, well, we can't actually fix it right now, but we'll try something. So we're going on to play the Yankees, and I had made a comment prior to the series. I can think of nothing better than making 55,000 people from New York shut up. And we worked for days. Couldn't get a shoe, couldn't get a wrap, nothing. So I went out there game one, and I did the exact opposite of making 55,000 people from New York shut up, whatever that is. I know that they were gleeful and happy as they guided my butt kicked around the park. The problem was that every pitch I threw when I made my rotation, the tendon snapped over the bone. And I could feel it and hear it, and no amount of painkillers was working to get it done. They kicked my butt, and probably professionally was the lowest I had ever been, because that's the game the Red Sox brought me to Boston to pitch. They couldn't get over the Yankees hump. And they brought me there to make that happen. So I'm devastated. So I'm done. I can't pitch anymore this year. I'm out for the series. 5 days later, we're down 3-0 after getting pummeled 19-6. And that night, that day, I had Reebok had sent me shoes and all this other stuff. And that day, the doctor came in, Dr. Morgan, he said, hey, listen, I was messing around with your dad last night. Which, yeah, that's a whole other conversation. He said, but I might have something for you. And so I never went to medical school, but I understood the human body as well as a medical student when it came to throwing mechanics. I knew all the intricacies of the kinetic chain and all the things that go with throwing a baseball. And know that transfer of power is essential from starting your big toe to the low of your hands. And he said, listen, here's what I can do. He said, I tried it on a cadaver. I stitched the skin of the ankle to the bone and created kind of a wall that would keep the ligaments, tendons in place. I was like, okay, let's go. He's like, no, we need to. I said, no, let's go. So it was funny, I'm laying on the trainer's table, and he's stitching my ankle, and teammates are walking in, a couple of them are gagging, and it's uncomfortable to say the least. I stand up and I start walking around, I'm like, wow, this is okay. So he said, we'll walk around for a few hours, see if it works, blah, blah, blah. It worked. They had to take the stitches out that night and put them back in the next day. So in baseball, we have Sunday chapel, and every team has a home chapel, and there are gentlemen that travel and that do chapel on the road. And during postseason, we had a gentleman named Walt Day, who was a friend and a common person to teach at our Sunday chapels. And we had a chapel before the game, and I couldn't attend because I was going through this treatment stuff. And I told you that story about the young lady in the car for this reason. I got done, and I said, well, hey, can you stick around? I'd like to go up and talk to you before the game. And I was feeling very guilty in a sense. And I got up, and remember, this is an 8 o'clock game. Game 6 of the playoffs against the Yankees, and I'm in Boston. And about 5:30, 5:45, I sit down with Walt, and Walt says, what do you need? I lost it. I was sobbing so hard that I almost lost my breath. Crying. I just broke down, I started crying. And it was a good 5 minutes. He didn't say anything. I couldn't speak to him because I just couldn't get words out. And he finally says, okay, what is it? I said, I don't deserve to ask him for anything. Game 1, I went up there and tried to be a tough guy and do it on my own. We all saw how that worked. But I don't deserve to get anything from him. And his reply was, that's not up to you. And we talked a little bit, and he said, you know, pray. And I did. I prayed. I didn't pray to win. I didn't pray to do anything other than I wanted the Lord to give me the strength to compete. If I can compete on an even field, I'm good with the chips falling wherever they fall. I mean, this is literally 2 hours. I'm sobbing, and I'm uncontrollably sobbing. So everybody that watches the game knows how it worked. I can tell you this. Game 6 of that series, I have no doubt that I was the most relaxed, calm human being on the face of the earth. I walked in and out each inning with my game plan, doing all the things I'd normally done, not an ounce of what I had game one. Not fear, nothing. We win. And I experienced some real world Christianity right after that, because I'm going to the press conference and I'm thinking, okay, this entire press conference has to be about the Lord, what I just witnessed, what I just experienced. I felt, I mean, look at me, I put on a couple pounds and I'm being kind, but I'm a big boy. There was no one who felt light on their feet than me that night. Nobody. Never once did I question what was happening, or I just focused on what I was doing. But I was getting ready to do the press conference, and it was a room like this, and there were this many people. And I sat down, and I thought about the whole way there, and my thought was, Lord, please just let me say and do the right thing here. And somebody, I don't remember what the first question was, but I said, I don't know if I can explain to you what I just experienced. I don't know if I can explain to you what just happened to me. And they're all on the edge of their seat. And I said, I've never experienced true faith before. And all of them, to a person, were like, rolling their eyes. And I got a little upset at that point. But I'm thinking, and I went on to talk about it. And, you know, they wrote the stories they wrote. And I went home, talked to my wife, and I went to sleep that night. I don't remember laying down or getting up. I just remember peace like I had never experienced before. Now, I think that in and of itself is an amazing story, but it doesn't really actually even come close to anything. About 6 days later, they took stitches out that night afterwards, and my ankle looked like a chewed hamburger. It was horrible. And we got to the World Series, and I'm going to start game 2 against the Cardinals. And we do the procedure the day before, and everything's fine. I'm walking around. So anybody that knows me, and you don't know me, so I'll explain this to you. In my career, I never woke up before noon during baseball season. It's a life so conducive to being a night out. So I go to bed 2 or 3 in the morning. The days I pitched, I would go to bed and wake up at 10 or 11, noon. But 6 a.m. was a galaxy far, far away. The morning of game 2 at 6:01, as I opened my eyes at the clock, I woke up. And I'm like, okay. And you know when you wake up and something's not right, you're not sure what it is, but you wake up and you're kind of like, and I woke up and I'm thinking to myself, okay, why did I wake up? And I went to roll over, and the only thing I can explain is that the side of my right leg felt like someone was rubbing broken glass up and down my ankle. And I pulled the cover back, and my thigh, or my calf was this big, and my ankle was this big. My leg was literally the same size from my calf to my foot, and it was blood red. Couldn't put an ounce of pressure on my foot. It was the most excruciatingly painful thing I've ever had. So now I'm thinking, okay, I can't pitch. So I pick up the phone at 6:30. I call Chris Schilling, who's our pitching kind of trainer. And first thing he says is, "Are you kidding me? It's 6:30 in the morning. What the hell are you doing up?" I said, "I got a problem." He said, "What's up?" I said, "Something's wrong with my leg. I can't walk. I can't. There's no way I can pitch. You're gonna have to call Derek and tell him." He said, okay, come in early, I'll take care of it. So I couldn't go back, I actually had to sleep with my leg outside because even the blanket rubbing against my leg was excruciatingly painful. So about 1 o'clock, I started heading to the car. Now, I'm not pitching. I looked at my wife and I said, John, no reason to come early tonight. I'm not pitching. Okay. So I live in a small town, and everybody in town, this is before I was openly Republican, so everybody still liked me. And I lived at a place that was very private. It was actually Drew Bledsoe's former house, and it had a long driveway, very private. Driving out of my driveway to the end, my driveway was about a quarter-mile long. There were probably 500 signs, handmade signs, go for everything. And so I drove the same way to the ballpark every day. There were signs on the road, all the way to the ballpark. On fence posts, on light poles. The Walpole Fire Department had their sign out front, good luck, Curt. And I'm listening to sports talk radio when people are calling in about how's he going to do tonight. And I'm thinking to myself, oh my God, these people have no idea. Sure. They have no idea what's going on. I had to drive to the park with my left foot because I couldn't touch the gas pedal with my right. I had nothing on it, I couldn't touch it, and it was excruciating. So I get to the ballpark, and Doug Garabelli, one of my dearest friends to this day, is videoing. He's got his own home camera, and he's videoing everybody coming in, and I leave up the message and turn it off. He's like, no, and he's a funny guy. He's like, what's going on with that? I said, you got to turn it off. He turns out and said, what's up? I said, you got to help me get in the clubhouse. I get out of the car, he goes, oh my God. What happened? I said, I have no idea. He literally had to almost carry me into the clubhouse. So I get to the trainer's room, and it's about 1:30, and I'm devastated. I mean, this is the whole series, I'm not pitching. And about 2 o'clock, Dr. Morgan comes in, and he's like, all right, let me see what happened. And he looks at my squad. First of all, everybody coming in the training room, we were like, oh my God, it was like gangrene or something. They were just like, it's going to have to be amputated. Dr. Morgan strolls in, and as calm as this, he walks in and he goes, okay, I know what I did. What does that mean? He said, I put an extra stitch in last night when we did this, and I punctured a nerve. And that's why it is the way it is. And I was like, okay, can you not do that? He takes the stitch out, and hand to God, like air out of a tire, you can see my ankle and leg compressing as the blood left. And I'm thinking to myself, wow. And I stood up, and it was a little sore, but it was going away. And I was like, all right, I can pitch. Oh my God, I can pitch. Now, you have to understand, on the days I pitched, I left the park 5 hours before first pitch. Everything I did was on a specific schedule because I was a preparation guy. It wasn't superstition, I just wanted to be prepared. And I never wanted to be caught off guard on the day I pitched. So the day I pitched was this event for me. Now I went from, it's a 7 o'clock game. It's probably 3:30. From, oh yeah, I'm going to watch the low pitch and hopefully we win, to, oh my God, I'm starting to get into the World Series. Now I'm panicking. My heart is racing because I'm behind. I'm trying to think of all these things. Excuse me, and I'm really not behind it. It's just anybody with a routine understands exactly what I mean. So I have my meeting with Jason, and I do all my meetings and all the things that I did on the day I pitched. And same thing, I had to do some stuff, and I asked Walt to hang around so I could say a freaking prayer. And I walked upstairs. Our chapel was a small room in Finland. And I sat down, and tears flowed. I was, again, almost hyperventilating, in absolute agony, crying my butt off. He didn't even say anything. I just sat down and started crying. I mean, uncontrollably crying. And, you know, it might have been disturbing to a grown man, but I knew exactly why I was crying. And he said, okay, talk to me. I said, I can't do this again. I can't go to him for another favor. I mean, on what planet am I worthy of his? He said, that's not up to you. You don't get to make those decisions. The Lord gets to choose, and he does choose. And I'm slowly kind of trying to gather. Again, this is like a couple hours before first pitch game to the World Series. I had to stay up there for another 15 minutes just to get myself composed again. So I go downstairs and I get ready for the game. And I hit the top step of the dugout. And as I hit the top step of the dugout, I don't know why, I didn't call my wife. I'm thinking to myself, okay, I didn't call Shonda. Little did I know, she was up in the family box. She saw me at the top step. She started crying. She was like, what the hell is going on? So I warm up, and there was an event during the game where it all came full circle. So 5th inning, I think it was, I've got Reggie Sanders on second base, and I'm pitching from the stretch. So I come to the stretch, and I'm sitting here, and I look back, he's got a pretty good lead, and I go to throw the pitch, and I was very quick. I didn't run on me because I was very quick on play. But I go to throw the pitch, and Reggie takes off from third. Mike Dee's up, he fouls the ball off. So I do what I've done for my whole career. All right, I'm going to turn to a second. Here, I'll do a spin move. And a spin move basically entails bringing your leg up and turning and throwing to second base. So I get the ball back. Ted doesn't give me a sign because I'm not throwing a pitch. So I come set. Greg's got the big lead again. I bring my leg up. He takes off, and I can't turn. I don't know why. Now I'm throwing a pitch. Jason has no idea what's coming. And I don't actually really know what I'm throwing. I'm throwing a half-fast fastball. And I'm thinking the whole way to the plate, oh my God, this is not happening. I throw the pitch. Matheny squares it up. Hits a bullet to Billy Miller at third base, who catches the ball, tags Reggie for the third out, inning over. If you watch the video, I'm walking up the field laughing out loud. Because I'm thinking to myself, first of all, this never happened to me, there's no way this should have happened, but okay, I get it. You're totally in control, and I'm an idiot to think otherwise. I was one of those seminal moments where I was like, okay, that was the exclamation point at the end of that series. Fast forward to game 4. Gabe Kapler, one of my closest friends ever, born Jewish, not practicing, more of an atheist, but and hardcore liberal. We used to have some great conversations. And he was a very introverted guy. I'm not introverted, that's the word. He was a very, we had great conversations. We'd argue and laugh and have fun. We're on the plane back from St. Louis, and Gabe comes and sits down next to me and he said, hey, what are you doing this week? I said, well, I'm having surgery at some point, and I think we're doing a parade too. I think that's going to happen. He said, yeah, no, I'm going to leave in a week. He said, but I need to have lunch with you before I leave. And I said, and we always have really good talks about religion. And I said, okay, what's up? He said, I don't know how to explain what I just saw. I can't explain it. I don't know how to tell people what I watched happen to you. I need you to tell me what happened. I need you to share the experience with me because something happened that wasn't normal and I don't know what it was. And we ended up having a conversation, and it was an incredibly powerful conversation. But that 10 days made it easy for me. Made it a lot easier than for some, and for others who don't experience it. It made it easy for me. And so I started to I realized I'm not on earth to have conversations solely with other Christians. Jesus came to help the sick, right? I mean, and so in my mind, after that, my conversation, I did Barbara Walters and talked very openly about, I started to realize that, how uncomfortable media was hearing about the Lord, because it didn't make for a good story in their mind. I never really cared, so. I'll flash back. When I played in Arizona in 2001, the day I got there, the media a writer had written an article about our third baseman, Matt Williams, and talked about how he was a horse's ass because he never spoke to the media, never talked. His nickname was the Marine, and it fit. And about 2 weeks later, that same writer wrote an article about me, how I never shut up. And the media couldn't get me to be quiet. Which gave, and you know, people talk about being older than you and being smart. I'm not smarter than young people, I'm just a little bit wiser because I've experienced things. That experience told me that's an unwinnable game. I'm not going to play it. I'm going to be myself. If you don't want me to answer the question, you know what you don't like, don't ask me. Because I'm going to give you my answer. I'm not, you can obviously tell I'm not a yes-no guy. Because the things that I talk about, discuss, and debate, be it my faith, my career, my dedication, my family, my wife, my mistakes, I'm passionate about. All those things have got me to today, for better or worse. And when you look at so many examples, from Justice Kavanaugh to General Flynn, to all the people in the last 3 or 4 years whose lives have been absolutely destroyed by a media that just didn't like them. You have to understand, when you look at that, what it means to you. Nobody's untouchable from a hating group of people. When people hate hard enough, they'll do things that are irrational and illogical. You add a conservative, common sense approach to Christianity, you go off the charts. Because they can't fight you unless they yell and call you names. They don't have a response based in data and fact. Because none of the things that they argue for are with those. Not none, but most of them. And so, so the day after the 2004 World Series, I'm on Good Morning America. And it's the election year. And Charles Gibson's interviewing me. And I say I'm naive, my wife just says I'm stupid. I said at the end of the interview, make sure you tell all your viewers to go out and vote. And he said, okay. And I said, and vote Bush. Literally, you ever heard of the pregnant pause? He's looking at me on the camera, and his mouth kind of drops open, and nobody's speaking. He's like, we'll be back. And I'm like, it's a big deal. 15 minutes later, I'm in the car. So we were the Disneyland. I'm going to Disney guy that year, which is a free flight to Disney, your family, yada yada. I'm in the back of the car, and my wife sitting next to me, and she said, I'm doing an interview, and she says, you got a phone call. I'm like, just take a message. She's like, no, it's the White House. I'm like, you know what, stop, just take a message. She's like, it's President Bush. Oh, all right. Hey, Curt, just wanted to let you know how appreciative I am of you speaking out for me today. I'd like you to come campaign with me in Ohio and Pennsylvania. I'm like, all right, sure, that's cool. Not understanding Red's last nation that already disavowed me. And I did. And say what you want about man and family. I got to sit in front of him and ask him questions I wanted to know. I didn't agree with him on everything. I don't agree with anybody on everything. And you never will. If you find somebody you agree with everything, you're lying to yourself. And so I say that little story because in 2011, I'm a huge hockey fan. That's my sport now. My youngest son is a goalie, and hopefully he wants to play in the NHL, and all the things that go with that. 2011, I watched Tim Thomas carry the Boston Bruins to a Stanley Cup like no goalie had ever done. Won the Conn Smythe, had the most amazing run ever. Did not go to the White House because he disagreed with Obama and his left wing. Absolutely destroyed in Boston. Haven't heard from him since. Vilified, crucified for his stance. Fast forward a couple years later, Patriots win, they don't go to the White House, and they are heroes and icons for not going to Trump's White House. When the game gets played like that, again, it's very easy for us. They're too dumb to realize we're smarter than they are. And I say that kind of facetiously, but I don't. Because the hypocrisy that we're shown, and again, I think it's all rooted in basic, the farther away this country gets from the Bible and the kitchen table, the deeper down the abyss we go. I was raised at my kitchen table. I know this generation probably has no concept of that, but people that are around my age understand. I did dumb stuff during the day, My mom told my dad, smack his back. That's gone. The male role models in this society have all but disappeared. First, in search of keeping up with the Joneses, which is pretty much impossible to do. But I say that because in 2011, Tim Thomas, who should have been given the key to the city for life, his name is not mentioned anymore. So now I realize, okay, that's how it works. Now you have the stuff going on in China in the NBA, which is beyond embarrassing and pathetic. And when you look at these people, I'm embarrassed for them. I'm embarrassed for my country that these people would think they represent anything or anything in our value set. And I will say this country was founded on Christian principles, not what liberals want to believe. All right? It doesn't mean that they're nowhere in the Constitutional Bill of Rights does it say separation of church and state. But the laws are written to keep the government out of church, not the church out of the government. That's a very, very different thing. And it's part of the argument. You guys are going to experience and y'all are going to experience arguments and debates. And coming out, I want you to win. I want you to win, be it by attrition or concession or whatever the other side does. But if you watched Charlie Kirk and Candace Owens, did anybody see the irony in a black woman being run out of a Philadelphia restaurant and having stuff thrown on her by a group of white people protesting to defend the rights of blacks? You look at, there's a picture of 1964 from Alabama, and it's literally a carbon copy of a young black lady with her school books being stuff thrown on her and cussed at her in Kansas. What's the difference? And it, again, it gets back, I think, to the faith and why I'm so excited to be here to do things like this. Because I always feel like they're not all dumb. And if you can make a smart person think about something when you're not in the room, you've kind of done something. And so, I always play a game with people that are atheists, and it's a yes/no game, and we'll play right now. And this is literally the conversation I'll have, so you can answer. Is there any doubt that there was a man named Jesus who lived? No. Right? No. I'm not saying he was divine, but is there any doubt there was a man named Jesus who lived, who claimed to be the Son of God? No. You can answer. Okay, so we have that said, and there's more affirmation for Christ outside the Bible than any character in history, by the way. Does anybody doubt that a man named Jesus was brought before Pontius Pilate and accused of speaking heresy by the Jews in that town? Is there any doubt that happened? No, there's no evidence to refute that. Okay. Barabbas, the murderer, was, and by the way, people were put to death a lot in that period of time, but crucifixion was the worst form of execution, and it was only given to the worst of the worst. Does anybody doubt that the Jews asked Pilate to kill Jesus over a murderer because he spoke heresy? That event is recorded outside the Bible. So do we acknowledge that happened? Okay. So the march up the mount with the cross on his back. Does anybody doubt that Jesus, a man named Jesus Christ, who claimed to be the Son of God, does anybody doubt that he was crucified? Is there any? No one's ever refuted that, right? So my question then is this: if you're an atheist, when did the disciples start lying, and why? Simple question: why? Was it to get people to believe in something they knew wasn't true, that they would die for? The common sense arguments are so easy. Let me ask you this: an elephant, a giraffe, a bumblebee, a mosquito, the pig, a cat, human beings, and bacteria. Is it easier to believe that every one of those things came from one cell, or that Jesus was the Son of God? It takes far more in my opinion, far more faith to believe the first one than the second. We have so much hubris that we believe nothing can be smarter than us, nothing can be more all-knowing than us. And you look at, I remember, so to put it in mathematical terms, which, by the way, it's a mathematical impossibility that he didn't exist in what we say was, based on him fulfilling 108 prophecies. But I heard this, and this is a great way to visualize this. The chances that Jesus Christ wasn't who the Bible says he was, mathematically would equal this. You take silver dollars, 10 high, and you cover the state of Texas with them. And you take one gold one and you randomly place it. And somebody walks out blindfolded and finds the gold coin on the first pick. That's kind of how the mathematical probability lines up. So, here's the other thing. Do I want to believe in a theory scientists can't even come close to proving? Because I was asked. They talk about the Big Bang. What happened before the Big Bang? Well, nothing. Well, no, something. Nothing. Something has never in history come out of nothing. It's confusing and it's hard to get your mind around, but that's the killer. Darwin even said himself. Talked about fossil chain and all the things that it was disproving theory of evolution because those intermediate species were never found. To this day, they still haven't been. The Cambrian era shows up, and all of a sudden, millions of new species show up. It didn't work that way. And again, I'm not saying that in a way that people get offended by that. I'm okay. They're getting offended for personal reasons, not because it's something I said. And I understand that, because to find out at 30 that maybe the life you lived was being judged, you were being held accountable, when you weren't holding yourself accountable, especially at this age. You guys, you're being thrown into, I'll tell you this, and I mean this with all due respect. The life you're living right now in college has absolutely no resemblance to the real world. None. Absolutely none. I believe now college is purely for social development. Unless you're a lawyer or you're going for a dedicated trade. What happens in college, and again, if you go on YouTube and watch these interviews with these college master's students who don't know who fought the Civil War, who think the British won, who don't know that North and South America isn't Nebraska and Texas. It's stunning to me, and again, terrifying. Terrifying. It's why I look at groups like this, and I have hope. I have hope. But I said at the beginning, I'm going to say it again, do not undervalue this point. There has never been a generation more in need of being engaged than you guys. None. Doesn't mean you're going to divert people, but when you in an argument and the response is always shouting and name calling, you win. And I say this is true. I don't like people. I'm human. I don't want people not to like me. But the subset of people that hate my guts are supposed to. Because my dad told me, don't ever try and make somebody you don't know like you. Isn't that what politics is? That's why people hate President Trump. He's not a politician. He's not funny either. But the fact of the matter is, he's a pragmatist. He's a problem solver. And people come to me and say, oh my God, how does he not, he doesn't represent Christian values. And I said, listen, when President Clinton was getting service in the Oval, I stopped looking for my moral compass in the White House. I look for my moral compass in here, and in the Bible, and in my friends, and all the things that go with that. But to play a moral compass game with politicians, come on. So many of those people have, I don't know if you guys saw the interview, Sheila Jackson Lee was talking to the former head of one of the agencies, and she was browbeating him, verbally abusing him, and she turned around and said, and he said to her, stop yelling at me. First off, you work for me. You work for me. And is there any doubt that most of them think the exact opposite to be true? I mean, I listen to Pelosi and Schumer and all of them, and a lot of the Republicans who are actually phony. And it's clear that they believe, well, I mean, who was it? Chris Cuomo, who was interviewing the gentleman, and he said, Chris, you don't get to tell me what the news is. He said, yes, I do. I get to tell you what's important. They believe it. Which all comes back around to, they really honestly believe we're dumbheads. We're deplorables. And the word deplorable is crucial because it's one of the words that Margaret Sanger used when she started Planned Parenthood. She wanted to get rid of deplorables, and her deplorable list was blacks, mentally handicapped, physically handicapped. We can cleanse this place, get rid of those people. 34 years later, Adolf Hitler puts the final solution in place and references Margaret Sanger's Planned Parenthood as one of the ways that they can implement this and pass it off to the public. Can't forget history. Can't erase it. As hard as they try, you can't let them. You can't let them. I would love to engage. I know I probably talked way past my time. I want to say again, thank you. This has been absolutely an honor. I hope you enjoyed me blabbing as much as I enjoyed blabbing. But I am thankful to God and all other things for being in a position to stand in front of you and talk, and for you being actually interested enough to sit. My wife was like 45 minutes ago. I know that. But I don't know for Q&A, or so I'm happy to talk. And just so you know, if you haven't already understood this, everything's on the table.
Yeah, if any of you need to leave, that's okay, but we're going to stick around if you're still okay to a couple questions. Maybe I'll selfishly take the first one, while you guys think yours. In a world of such polarity, politically, worldly, however, how do college students and citizens of Seward unite themselves with believers and try to unite common people?
I firmly believe there is no more middle ground. I'm not happy and proud to say that, but I don't believe there's a middle ground anymore, and I think that's the intent. I think that driving the wedge between left and right is an intentional thing, and we're suffering from it. I think the only thing left for you to do is, again, you have to be informed. And that doesn't mean Google or Wikipedia, because I just showed you they're redefining what the language means. And we've taken racist, and we've taken homophobe and Islamophobe and all the terms that the left has used, and we've destroyed their true meaning. Racism is the inherent belief that another race is inferior to you physically or mentally. Everything else is prejudice. What we're dealing with is prejudice, not racism. Yes, racism still exists. It's always going to exist because we are a deeply flawed species. But we've marginalized them. KKK has no standing. The white national, the Aryan nation, they have no standing. They don't move the polls and the votes, except for the fact the left continues to give them a voice. And act as if they are a driving motive behind the things we do and say. Racism and white supremacy are about as conservative as I am a marathon runner. And that's... But here's my biggest problem. We are a one-event society now. By that I mean, the left is allowed to define you, if they don't like you, by any event you've ever been involved in at any time in your life. Whether, and here's the other thing, whether it happened or not. I've lived 52 years. I've never said, hey God, never said, I can't say words that are said by people that are racist. I can't. I was raised in a home that didn't, they make me sick to my stomach. But I can think of a ton of events where, out of context and seen in a different light, oh my God, you guys in the clubhouse, the things we see in the clubhouse, let me tell you something. If the public got a whiff of the things we say to each other, it would be, well, it'd be the end. Athletes, I mean, because that's, if you're in the Army, you understand what I'm talking about. You're bearish, you can say anything you want about anybody. Everything is on the table. But you're on the same team. Let me give you an example. President Trump on the back of the bus being in the Navy. What that told me, he never had a group of guy friends. Because guys don't talk like that, number one. And he was trying to impress people they didn't know. Because when I heard the tape, I was like, people don't talk like that. But that's what happens when you grow up in a very different culture, different environment. You could tell. And they laughed because it was Trump. But that back of the bus event, out of 70 years, is who he is. I don't hold them, they hold the world to a standard they couldn't even touch. It was stupid, it was reprehensible, it was also tainted before he ran for office. Not that that matters. He's cheated on his wife and all the things that go with that. What is it? He lives in a glass house, you're not building the first stone. Those things, he made promises. He's the first president in my life who made promises that he kept. That's all I need. I don't need anything more. Don't tell me morally what I need to be doing or saying, or I'll take care of that stuff. You just run the country, keep us safe, and get the economy going. I know, and this is a state I'm sure that has had a vested interest in the tariff wars and all the things going on with China. I can't imagine how hard it's impacted. But I think, if I'm right, he's worked very hard to subsidize and to compensate. It's going to be a pain point, right? I mean, there's going to be pain. But it's brought on by decades and decades of apathy and letting these people do what they want. I mean, the Paris Climate Accord, we were being held to a standard nobody else was. We've done more to help the climate outside of that accord than any company in it. And it was just a group of the suggestions. Here's what we would like you all to do. But hey, China, until 2030, you do what you need to do. I mean, I don't know about you, and I didn't go to business school, but that doesn't sound like a really good negotiating tactic. Get informed. Engage people on the other side where possible. And that's why I say I think it's hard. It's getting hard to do that because they don't. Well, look, you watch Stephen Crowder, what Charlie Kirk, some of the videos he has. These people are in his face screaming, "Kavanaugh's a rapist." And Charlie's, okay, where's the proof? Oh my God! Like Trump. Trump's a racist. Well, he's not. Well, how can you say he's not? Obviously he is. Because they've said it enough that's a foregone conclusion. Let's get past the fact that he's a racist. Let's talk about the other stuff. When we allow the conversation, I always argue, don't give me what about. Well, what about? What about this? What about that? Answer the question. Why is Hillary Clinton not in jail? Well, Trump's just as good. No. Let's talk about once. We never do that. You ever notice that? We never, I'll give you an example. I'm at an event, and go ahead, if somebody else has a question, take the mic and I'll shut up. But Ann Coulter and Bill Maher, who apparently dated, which, that's a whole different thing. That's a Curt Schilling episode. She lays out a detailed, well thought out, fact-based argument against illegal immigration and how it's just devastating the country. She does this for 10 minutes, and this is in Boston, so I'm one of the 4 Republicans in the room. She lays it all out. His response, yeah, you're a slut. Everybody laughs, except us, and the conversation moves to another point. What just happened? Where's the answer to the illegal immigration problem that she just presented to you? That's what they do. And so, engage, don't let people out of the conversation until they either chicken out or give a fact.
What are your thoughts on President Trump deciding to pull troops out of Syria and leaving the Kurds to fight for themselves? And do you think that action is going to set the Kurds up to be subject to genocide like they were in the early 2000s under Saddam Hussein?
Okay, let's be, so again, the media has done an amazing job. Now, I don't ever underestimate or undervalue the life and talent of an American soldier. it's 50 soldiers. This is not, they're not having a paintball war on the border. This is a war. Those 50 soldiers coming home are now out of harm's way. Are we fighting a group who every time there's a conflict, they scream war for oil? They're against it until he's for it? I know, I don't have all the information he has. I know his advisors have far more insight than I do. They clearly believe it's in America's best interest that those 50 soldiers come out. Now, I'll revert back to Obama pulling out soldiers. I was over there twice and visited with soldiers who were in the battle for Mali and other places who were sick to their stomachs when they had to go back and retake land that their fellow soldiers had been killed on taking the first time. There's an ISIS problem and all the things go with that, but I don't think those 50 soldiers will linchpin to keeping them in prison. Turkey's already talked about how hard it was to begin with to maintain those facilities. But if there's a mass slaughter of Kurds because 50 American soldiers were pulled out, the conversation isn't about the 50 American soldiers. And like I said, we're so much less informed than the people making those decisions. I trust them. And I want to add one more thing. When President Trump was running, he interviewed, I want to say he interviewed General Flynn for one of the 4 stars for DOD job. And I've been brought up to believe, to this point, what the things you talk about define your intelligence. And this general said something I never heard before and it resonated with me. He said, President Trump asked the smartest questions he had ever heard. And he said, oftentimes, it's not the questions they can answer, it's the questions they ask. He recognizes, he loves the military, but he doesn't think it's a giant game of risk. I think he's smarter than everybody. The former president thought he was the smartest person in every room. This guy, he sounds like it, but I've known him since 2006. He's a problem solver, and if he can't solve a problem, he's going to bring in somebody that can.
All right, we'll take one more question. If anyone's got one, go down here and then we got
Philly's got it.
I know you've experienced this a little bit yourself recently, but how important is it for young people considering running for office? How important is that decision for them knowing that they could be labeled racist, bigot, white supremacist, etc.?
So I played 10 years in Philly and 5 in Boston, and I played for New York fans, and I'm never going to hear something from me I've heard before. But, and I think I can run for office for that reason alone. I don't care. That stuff doesn't water off the I know who I am. And the people that know me know who I am. I played 22 years in the big leagues in the most culturally diverse environment ever. I don't think racism would just be poking its head up now if I was John Hawker. But they're going to believe what they believe. I tell my boys and my kids, there's 30 minutes every person in the world shares common. That 30 minutes when you go to bed before you fall asleep, it is impossible to lie to yourself. You can say all you want, you know in your heart. For me, it was always, I worked my butt off today. And in my heart, well, you know what? You can say what you want, but you can't lie to yourself. If you can talk to yourself in those 30 minutes and be okay with the person you are, you sleep better at night. And you never, ever, ever have, I'm going to run for office, and obviously there's a billion hours of audio of me out there and video. Nothing's going to come up. There's not going to be a second family, or a wife abuse report, or cocaine, or a DWI, or any of the things that put athletes on the front page of the newspaper. There's only going to be, I'm a conservative. And today, that's kind of like being a member of the Klan back in the 30s. Know who you are. And like I said, don't ever live your life to impress people you don't know.
Let's give her a round of applause.
Thank you guys for coming out. Really an honor just having you from Seward. And then CR is gonna maybe have a little small reception after this. So
Thank you again.